the story of the Harpies. In the vast tapestry of Greek mythology, few creatures embody both wrath and mischief as vividly as the Harpies. These winged, fearsome creatures have intrigued and terrified generations. Their images imprinted in ancient texts, art, and folklore. Often depicted as women with the faces of birds, the Harpies were known to torment their victims, swooping down from the heavens to snatch food, wreak havoc, and bring curses upon those they chose to target. The very name Harpies conjures an unsettling vision. Beasts who strike fear into the hearts of mortals, divine beings, and heroes alike. But their role in Greek mythology goes beyond mere terror. They were agents of punishment, divine instruments wielded by the gods to enforce their will. Yet, like many figures in ancient myth, the Harpies represent more than just their brutal actions. They symbolize themes of punishment, vengeance, and the unpredictable forces of nature. In this documentary, we will explore the various aspects of the Harpies' mythology. We will dive into their origins, their characteristics, and their most famous encounters in Greek mythology. We will also consider the symbolic significance of these fearsome creatures, how they represented the divine wrath of the gods, and what they tell us about ancient Greek views on justice and the natural world. Part 1. Who were the Harpies? The Harpies were not just random, terrifying beings. They had a specific role in ancient Greek mythology, and their physical and mythological origins are deeply entwined with the primal forces of nature. The name Harpies comes from the Greek word rho-pi-upsilon-iota, harpuia, which means to snatch or to steal, perfectly encapsulating their role in myth as ravenous, unpredictable creatures who stole away what was not theirs. According to the earliest accounts, the Harpies were daughters of Thaumas, a sea god, and Electra, one of the Oceanids, a type of water nymph. In some sources, they are depicted as the offspring of the primordial deities of the air and the sea, representing an ancient union of celestial and aquatic forces. Their lineage places them as part of the larger family of mythological figures associated with chaos, danger, and the wild, untamable elements of the world. In early mythology, the Harpies were described as winged women with the heads of birds. However, their physical descriptions often varied. Some texts describe them as terrifying and beautiful, with beautiful female faces and the sharp, menacing talons of birds. Other accounts emphasize their monstrous nature, describing them as fully bird-like, with the faces of vultures or other predatory birds and massive wingspans. They were also often portrayed as being foul-smelling, evoking a sense of rot and decay wherever they went. This bird-woman hybrid image of the Harpies reflects the duality of their nature. They were both beautiful and hideous, capable of both seduction and violence, often wielding their beauty as a weapon before descending into ferocity. They were part human, part bird, which positioned them as figures that bridged the mortal and divine worlds, reflecting the unpredictable nature of the gods they served. As for their specific roles in mythology, the Harpies were often seen as embodiments of divine vengeance. In many of the myths, they acted as agents of punishment, often sent by the gods to torment those who had incurred divine wrath. Their mere presence was enough to cause chaos, signaling that the gods were displeased and willing to act in retribution. Part 2. The Harpies' role in Greek mythology. The Harpies were not just mythical creatures to be feared. They were instruments of divine punishment and retribution. They were often dispatched by the gods to torment mortals who had angered them or violated their laws. In a society where divine justice was seen as a vital force, the Harpies were a chilling reminder of the gods' ability to impose their will upon the mortal realm. One of the most famous stories involving the Harpies is the tale of Phineus, a blind prophet from Thrace. Phineus had been granted the gift of prophecy, but was punished by Zeus, who found his use of this gift to be deceitful. In some versions of the myth, Phineus is a king who reveals the secrets of the gods. For this transgression, Zeus punishes him by sending the Harpies to torment him. They would swoop down and steal his food every time he tried to eat, leaving behind only scraps and filth. Phineus, starved and tormented, called upon the help of the Argonauts, who were passing through the region. Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, and his crew agreed to help Phineus. With the help of the Boreads, twin brothers Zets and Calais, who were sons of the north wind, the Harpies were chased off. As the Harpies fled, they were driven away to the distant islands known as the Strophades, where they were said to live in perpetual exile, never to trouble Phineus again. In this myth, the Harpies served as agents of divine punishment, sent to cause suffering for their own amusement or to enforce divine justice. Another famous story involving the Harpies is that of King Aeolus, the ruler of the winds, who sent them to punish the people of the island of Lemnos. The island's inhabitants had angered the gods by killing their husbands. In response, the Harpies were sent as agents of divine retribution, and they proceeded to attack the women of Lemnos, bringing further misfortune and suffering. In many versions of the myths, the Harpies appear as symbols of punishment for moral failings, cruelty, and dishonor. They would swoop down to punish transgressions, particularly those associated with defiance against the gods or the breaking of sacred laws. They were often seen as a manifestation of the wrath of the gods, unable to be escaped by mortals and wreaking havoc wherever they went. But while the Harpies' role was typically that of tormentors, some versions of the myth offer a slightly different perspective. They were also known as the daughters of Thaumas, the god of the sea and wonder, and as such, they were sometimes associated with the more chaotic and unpredictable aspects of nature, rather than being mere instruments of vengeance. In this sense, they were more ambiguous figures, representing both divine justice and the wild forces of the world that could not be tamed or controlled. Part 3. The Harpies' Symbolism. The Harpies were not merely creatures of terror. They also embodied important concepts in ancient Greek culture and religious beliefs. As creatures that bridged the natural world and the divine, the Harpies represented the untamable, chaotic forces of nature. Their appearance, half-human, half-bird, reflected the duality of life: beauty and horror, harmony and chaos, reason and madness. In many ways, the Harpies symbolized the forces of nature that could not be controlled, forces that would come upon mortals without warning and without mercy. These creatures were linked to windstorms, famine, and disease, all of which were often seen as punishments from the gods. Just as the Harpies could swoop down on unsuspecting victims, so too could these natural forces descend on humans, uprooting lives and causing havoc without reason. The Harpies, therefore, represented the uncontrollable chaos that surrounded the mortal world. Additionally, the Harpies were often seen as harbingers of doom, an omen of things to come. The very sight of them in the sky, their wings flapping furiously as they flew over the land, signaled that divine retribution was at hand. This made them both feared and revered, as their arrival was a sign that the gods were watching and that the consequences of mortal misdeeds were about to be visited. Furthermore, in Greek mythology, the Harpies embodied the consequences of hubris, excessive pride or arrogance before the gods. Many of their victims had crossed the line with the gods, believing that they could outsmart or defy the divine. The Harpies were a stark reminder that no mortal could escape the wrath of the gods. Their actions reinforced the ancient Greek belief in the balance of justice, where mortals were expected to honor and respect the divine, lest they suffer divine punishment. Part 4. The Legacy of the Harpies. While the Harpies may have been terrifying creatures in ancient Greek mythology, their legacy has endured throughout the centuries. Over time, their role in Greek mythology has been interpreted in various ways, from being mere tormentors of mortals to representing larger, more complex themes of divine retribution and the forces of nature. In ancient art, the Harpies were often depicted in a variety of ways. In some works, they were shown as beautiful women with bird wings, their appearance both alluring and dangerous. In others, they were more grotesque, their faces twisted with rage and their bodies contorted in unnatural poses. The contrast between their beauty and monstrosity highlighted the dual nature of these creatures, their seductive power and their terrifying violence. In literature, the Harpies have appeared in many forms, often being portrayed as the embodiment of vengeance or punishment. They have continued to appear in various retellings of ancient myths and even in modern works. Their most famous appearance in literature, aside from the myth of Phineas, is in Homer's Odyssey, where they torment the blind prophet Phineas. But perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Harpies is their symbolic significance. Their roles as agents of punishment and enforcers of divine will have influenced not only later Greek literature, but also the way in which divine justice has been understood in Western thought. The Harpies remain a potent symbol of the unchecked forces of nature and the consequences of moral failings, a reminder of the wrath that can descend upon humans who overstep their bounds. What do you think the Harpies symbolize in Greek mythology? Were they simply punishers, or did they represent something more complex about human nature and the gods? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.